So, welcome everyone to the Lightning Talk brought to you by AFNOM and CSS, a joint event from the university's Computer Science Society and Hacking Club. We have got 6 really awesome talks set out for this evening. Everything from speedrunning to cybersecurity to metaprogramming, which is something I'm personally really looking forward to. But it would be a lie if I said I wasn't looking forward to every single one of these talks. Somehow they're all just as good as last time, and those were excellent. And I'm so looking forward to all of them. It's quite cool. We have not all the security, they're not all security ones. They're not all kind of random ones, but we have an eclectic mix of all of them. There's all sorts of really interesting things, no matter what you are personally into. There will be something for everyone, don't worry. They're not all technical, some of them are. So essentially the way that this evening will roughly work, all of our talks are live. Recorded talks are possible and something we could have considered, but we don't really like them because honestly, they feel really recorded. So that every single talk you're going to hear is going to be live. So if technical slip-ups do happen, please have a little, mercy. We've practiced a bit. So the way that it's going to work is at about 10 past, we'll start. And our first speaker will come on and they'll talk for 10 minutes and no more. And after that, we'll go to the next talk and then the next talk and then all the way through all 6 talks, which will take a bit more than an hour because we have to have some transitions and stuff like that. And after that, what we're going to do is everyone will come on and we're going to have a Q&A session. So during people's talks, please chuck your questions into the YouTube live stream chat, or if you really want into the CSS Discord or the AFNOM Discord. But yeah, YouTube chat would be much better. And what I'll do is I'll keep track of all of those and ask all of the questions at the end, and we'll try and have some sort of a conversation. It'll be loads and loads of fun. So kind of just to go through the order of the talks and get you guys hyped. We have Oliver talking about cybersecurity and how we can learn through attack and defense. Ryan is going to be talking about the evolution of Super Mario Odyssey speedrunning. Dan is going to be talking about how to live on a student budget, just for a change of pace from the previous 2. Ori's coming back and going to give us a talk on macro metaprogramming is awesome and until it's not. Zoe is going to be giving us a talk on why computer science needs the humanities. And James is going to finish off and bring us about artificial intelligence and how programmers scammed the art world. Hopefully you've noticed there's a little bit of a variation in how those are going to go. It's a big mix, and all of the talks are going to be different and they're all going to be awesome. Remember that if there's a talk that you're going through and if you don't particularly, if it's not your thing for whatever reason, hang on for 10 more minutes and it'll be over. And it's fine. Lightning talks are so much fun. And I'm actually quite upset. Next time I'll have to get someone else to do this bit because I've got a number of things that'd be great to talk about. A few people in the chat have noticed, yes, there's a Lego Old Joe. I got mine a day later than my housemate, which was really, I'm not entirely sure. We live at the same place, and yet the guild decided that they should be sent on 2 different days. I'm sure the guild in its infinite wisdom knows best. It's a lovely, lovely tower. I hope everyone's got theirs and is liking theirs. And yes, the CSS hoodie. This is the old one. I don't know, the new ones I don't think have gone out actually yet. I didn't order one because I already have one of these older ones, which I love. And I think I wore the AFNOM one at the last of these talks. So to have equal representation of both societies, which I both love, I am wearing the CSS one today. Although, yeah, maybe we'll see. Maybe at the end I'll wear a different one in each transition. Just to add a little bit of variety to life. It was intercepted and bugged. I like the idea that you could bug Lego pieces. I'm sure it's technically possible. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what who you're imagining would do that. You could imagine like some Yeah, I don't know. Just like imagine like Russian Cold War kind of style spying. Yes, so I did consider actually. Well, not for long, but I did consider it wouldn't. I could have gotten another AFNOM one and another CSS one and kind of cut them and stitch them together so I could wear both. Especially last year, I had the decision in first year for the EPS awards that I had to choose to sit at the AFNOM table or the CSS table. And so I sat at the AFNOM table, but frequently wandered over to the CSS one. It was quite, not sure if anyone's ever forgiven me for that. But both societies are good, so I can represent both. Yes. Yeah, I have to. So I have my setup all set up lovely, and it's wonderful. I've got notes and Discord and YouTube, and every time I accidentally scroll up onto the YouTube, I see myself, but delayed about a minute or so. Unfortunately, it's not live perfectly. There's a little bit of delay between Zoom and YouTube, and you can see the lovely Zoom logo, I think, in the bottom. No, it'll be in this corner, won't it? Lovely Zoom logo, which is quite sad. Last time we had to have an emergency. So we had to switch to Zoom because we realized we were going to have more than 25 people come, which was quite sad, and meant that we had to move from a lovely Discord voice channel into Zoom and make everyone suffer. But this time only we have to suffer, and everyone in the main, everyone who's watching can actually enjoy it on YouTube, which is accessible in all the web browsers and doesn't require loads of sign-ins and all of that. All the societies are lovely, yes. Yeah, no, I promise no one is holding a gun to my head. There's definitely no one standing right there. I'm making this statement of my own free will and volition. Wonder if there was any consideration to add a single brick to the old Joe that isn't used in the instructions. I was really concerned because it comes in non-standard packaging. It's a really nice like Ziploc bag, but I was quite concerned, thinking as I'm getting close to the end, well, what if they don't have the one piece that I need, or what if there's an extra one at the end? And I genuinely did feel that. So I'm glad they didn't, just because that would be quite cruel. But yeah, I'm wondering now if, because it's kind of like a hobby-made model, I've been reminded that I really like building Lego, and maybe I need to find more things to build Lego things of. Like a Lego CSS logo might be quite challenging to make. I'm going to be honest, but but other logos could be possible to do. Holding a gun to my head would violate social distancing. You're completely correct. I like that. Yeah, it's illegal to hold a gun to someone's head at the moment because of social distancing, and that means that no one will do it. All right, so because of the delay, if I start saying this now at about 10 past for everyone on stream, the talk will start at 10 past. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Oliver to talk about cybersecurity and learning through attack defense. Welcome, Oliver. You have 10 minutes. Welcome.
Hello. This is my talk, Cybersecurity, Learning Through Attack Defense. I've taken part in lots of capture the flag competitions. So you're given a list of challenges, and there's typically sandbox, so you can't quite destroy the environment, but you can have a poke around. But this takes away some of the learning possibilities, because sometimes valid solutions to the problem might not work in these areas. Also, I've had ones where just because something should work, it's been changed and altered in a way where it's not a typical implementation, or it doesn't have a standard response. So it'll give an altered skew on your experience. And I find CTFs will typically focus on attacking. So you'll be given a binary or a web service and you need to attack it, not defend it, which is where I'm more specialized towards. Cybersecurity can be described as a game of cat and mouse. Every day a new exploit will be developed, and every day a new exploit will be patched. So instead of doing these Jeopardy style competitions, could there be a competition format that more better represents this sort of cat and mouse? And the answer is attack defense competitions. In these competitions, you're given a server or two that you have to defend, and opponents are given a server that they have to defend. These will be exact copies of the ones you're attacking at the start. Obviously, whilst you're attacking and patching, they will change and alter. But on these servers, you'll have vulnerable services, so a Node service or a Python service, or you'll have a misconfiguration where something's not set up quite right, so you're allowed to exploit it, and you need to try and get onto the box and get the highest privilege level on it. And depending on the competition, it'll be a mixture of custom coded applications and like web content management systems and file sharing programs. So if you do want to delve into this, how should you start looking at this? First of all, you should have a plan of action. Are you playing to learn or you're playing to win? Whilst it's nice to win matches, you'll become even better and learn if you play to learn. Typically, I will play competitions to learn, especially if the competition occurs regularly. I play as if the services I defend are business critical. That means I can't take them down whilst I'm trying to patch them. They have to be up as much as possible. I can take them down for a short time while the patch is being applied and have to bring them back up. Typically, when you're learning, you also want to do very small patches. If you know the attacker's got in through using a certain method, patch that single method, not everything, because then you can see how attackers will change their payloads to go around firewalls and such. The next thing is know your box. As soon as you connect to the box, you should take note of what's running on it, what programs are running on it, and what networking is connected to it. This comes in two parts, the networks and the processes. For network connections, you want to look at what ports are listing. Later in the competition, you'll want to see all the network connections, as this will help you to see if you have been exploited and there is an attacker on the box. So if you see here, there is the processes here that are running, but you find a strange connection to one of these processes. How do you know what's going on? So this is one example of a command that you can use to list processes. If you note here, you can see the chain of bash has been spawned from this process, and you can see the child processes. So it's even easier to tell what an attacker has done on your box. Third, keep logs. Whilst it's easy to use PS to list running processes, it would be much nicer to see them in real time and what's actually happening on the box. To do this, you can use a tool called pspy. This will list all running processes every 100 milliseconds, I think it is by default. If I'm running pspy on my box, I will actually send the results to a log on my computer so I can look back at the attacker's commands after the competition has ended. It is also possible to do this with another tool called Snoopy, which is a different tool entirely. However, I've experienced many times where commands will be missing or cut off if they are too long. So you know what should be running and are logging the running processes. What comes next? Taking copies. It's the most important thing. If you do a competition, take a copy of the services. Don't download the whole box. There's no need to download a whole box. Just take note of the operating system and just copy the services they're running, because you already have a starting point if you want to learn. You've got the notes on the competition that you've actually made, and then you can carry on going after the competition has ended if you have a copy, and you can test the patches better and test how well you can patch under pressure. So you would patch something and then try exploiting it and then patching it again and go back and forth until you can't get onto the box anymore. The next thing, always patch first. This is twofold. You'll be protected from attacks and you'll be quicker at developing exploits for your opponents. There's always multiple ways onto a box and multiple ways to escalate privileges. So you really need to pick a priority to patch, whether you patch foothold or patch privilege escalation. When you start out, you want to try and prevent attackers from getting a foothold. However, logging you will have set up will help you guide you in future matches, so you can start patching privilege escalation instead. But how do you know what to patch and how do you patch it? Google. It's the most important tool a hacker could use. You should never expect to know every single exploit or every single vulnerability. I will spend most of the competition researching exploits, and in short matches, it's not unusual for me to be still researching even after the match has ended and hoping to test my research on the live box. But that's why copies are so important. 7, it might seem counterintuitive at first, but always attack yourself. You might have applied a patch, but you might not have applied the best patch that you can do. You might not have made it completely secure. So an attacker can still get on with a different exploit to yours. So you want to test that the exploit that you've developed has been patched for your system. Because another thing attackers can do is take a log of all the network connections and then reuse your exploits against you. In addition to this, it also challenges you to think outside of the box and try to evade the patching you have performed and inform your decision of how to exploit your opponent. One of the next things is very important to know about: reset buttons. All the time I see new people come onto an attack defense and start resetting the box every time that they are owned. This is very tempting, and it's very tempting to reset the box every time someone connects to it. But in many competitions, there's very little point in doing this unless you have the patch ready for the vulnerability. There's no point resetting a box if you know that after it's reset, it will just be exploited straight away. A box post-compromise is a treasure trove of knowledge, as you can see how an attacker tries to hide and stay on the box and maintain their grasp on the box. And you can steal some of these techniques that attackers has used in future matches. If you have got completely owned, try to use the logging that you've set up through PSpy or Snoopy to understand how to patch the method of get the attack used to get onto the box before resetting. Make sure the patch is ready and it works before you reset, or you'll be back to square one. And finally, have fun. Matches can be long, from 3 hours to 30 minutes. Remember to take regular breaks, especially if you're feeling stressed or annoyed. It can be hard to see that the server has been attacked fully and you need to reset it again because they've got on. It can be very stressful if it happens multiple times over in short matches. There is no harm in taking a 15-minute break and going back to play another match. In fact, the other thing is people will play dirty. People will not act as if the services are business critical. They will have a static web page. I love these systems the most because it is so much more rewarding to get onto their systems and exploit them, because there's playing for learning and playing to win, and we don't like the people who play to win. Thank you for my talk. I hope you have some inspiration to take part in these attack defend competitions. And finally, I have some resources that will go out with the slide. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Oliver. That was excellent. I really enjoy how you put Google and then you said links at the end. I didn't see a link to Google at the end, I feel robbed. I don't know where to find it now. It'd be very difficult. If only there was a way of searching the internet to find a link or something like that. That'd be really convenient. Now that we've had Oliver's talk, we're going to move on to Ryan's talk on the evolution of speedrunning Mario Odyssey. Having played this game for about 2 hours myself, I'm really looking forward to learning how this game actually works, as well as hopefully some of the speedrunning stuff as well. So Ryan, take it away.
Hello, now you can hear me. All right, cool. One of my slides broke just at the last second, so hopefully everything's fixed by now. That was very scary, but I hope we're all good. So today I'm going to be speaking about the evolution of speedrunning Super Mario Odyssey. This is a game that I picked up during the first lockdown. I'd never played a 3D Mario game before. The only experience I've had was playing New Super Mario Bros. 1 on the DS. So Odyssey is a 3D Mario game. You fly around different kingdoms in your spaceship called the Odyssey, this thing here. And the aim of the game is to collect power moons to charge your ship to go fly to the next kingdom, and ultimately you have to go and rescue the princess. There's a capturing mechanic where Mario's hat is a ghost, and you can throw this hat at different creatures around the world, which allows Mario to transform into them, and then he gains special abilities. So he can capture this onion, and he'll be able to stretch up his legs and get up to really high spaces. So speedrunning. There are a few different ways you can speedrun games. You could go for any percent, which is generally completing the game as fast as possible. So that might include skipping out some boss fights, major content, in order to get to the end sequence. There are some other different types of speedrunning categories. So there's also low percent, which is usually collecting the least amount of things possible, or in this game's version of low percent, we have minimum captures, which is completing the game by capturing as little things as possible. The current minimum captures record is 3 things, and this involves you need to learn how to play with your hands and your feet both at the same time, go through every single wall possible, get infinite height in some places. That's absolutely crazy, some of the tricks you have to do. So speedruns generally are on this website called speedrun.com. And this is just the case for pretty much most games. So this allows you to keep track of, for example, the times of the world record progression throughout history, and also everyone's runs. So the first run was on 27th of October. This was a day before the release, so I managed to get a copy before it was actually supposed to be out. So it was a 3 hours, 28 minutes, which is fairly similar to my first run of the game. I'm pretty sure they utilized no tricks whatsoever, but then Nycrovita came in, he did a proper run. The first sub-hour run, the build-up to this was absolutely incredible. No one thought sub-hour was impossible until Nycrovita came along and then absolutely just destroyed the scene. And then most recently we have Tyrone 18, who's an absolutely amazing runner, who recently got the world record on 15th of Jan. And then before that, Mitch, who's quite young actually. He's 15 and was holding it for a while. So on the first week of the game being released, lots of glitches and lots of skips were discovered. So we had Moon Cavern skip, which is if you jump precisely on the head of the Sphinx here, you're able to wall jump off one wall. You have a very limited amount of frames where you can do this, and then wall jump off the second wall to completely remove about 10 minutes of content. So this skips out a final boss fight, a proper endgame gauntlet, before you actually go straight to the end Bowser fight and then go rescue the princess. We also had Night Skip, which again removes some content. We had fast to boss strats discovered for the Mecha Wiggler. We had Dino Skip, which removes just most of the kingdom, and we had Klepto Skip, which again just completely sequence broke the game just by jumping straight over some loading zones for cutscenes, which is absolutely incredible. And we had some more stuff later on, so we found more faster Bowser fights, Scooter Clip, which skips an annoying RC car capture, another Sphinx Clip, but this time this allowed you to go through this wall behind the Sphinx instead of jumping weirdly on walls above it. So I wanted to speak about 2 major clips today. So first of all was moon clipping, that was discovered in June 2018 by Robin Cyrex. He was just messing around, seeing what was possible, and I'll just show you the clip of what this person did. So this person backflips into a wall while capturing it in a very specific frame, which then allows him to go through the wall. So this happens because when Mario backflips and cap throws, his hitbox gets pushed backwards. But when you're normally playing the game, your hitbox will be pushed back towards inbounds. But if you collect a moon while you're being pushed back in towards inbounds, that push is then cancelled, so you remain clipped out of bounds. This allows you to then just completely stay out of bounds. So this originally useless clip was then so much theory crafting and rerouting was done, and we found that we could utilize this in 2 places and completely change the routing. Oh, I think you got Tom Chi Sound here, who's an Australian runner, but all of this out of bounds stuff, which is absolutely crazy. Anyway, so yeah, can I go away from that? Yeah, so that was the side that broke, so I had to put a YouTube video in there. So we discovered a lot about out of bounds movement. We learned about invisible walls and how we could then walk around to different places that weren't expected, which was quite cool. There was also Fish Clip, which was discovered a lot later. I'm going to be speaking about. This was discovered by Circle, who is quite an avid glitch hunter, and they're usually the ones figuring out why or how glitches work. So Circle was the one who figured out why, how the previous glitch worked, and then they also discovered this after remaining completely inactive for a while, which was they found that if they, that sound is annoying. So the boundary of the edge of this world is exponential. So the closer you move to this boundary, the more the force is pushing you to push you away from this boundary. But he found that if you captured a creature using the capture mechanic, it takes a couple of seconds for this exponential force to build up and push you back. So they found that you could do some interesting things, because right now that the pushback force for Mario's current position, which is 0, is being calculated. But if you capture, you instantly warp to the fish. So you could easily get over this boundary, which was otherwise impossible via normal swimming through the game. And later on that day, we found that you could actually get 2 moons quite easily by clipping out of bounds here, getting this moon here partially in bounds by doing a shake, and then also go straight into a loading zone for a Sphinx where you'd normally have to answer a question for, and then waste a few times. But this rerouting only saves 5 seconds, but it was utilizing new tricks that were being discovered every day. So every small trick that was being discovered, we found that it was possible to just cut off a few more seconds here, a few more seconds there. And it's fascinating how all of these glitch hunters and how this communities work together, and we're all trying out different things, and eventually we're getting the times lower and lower to that sub-hour that I was mentioning earlier. I think that's all I have planned. So thank you for listening to my talk. Hopefully I've inspired someone to do some speedrunning, and credits to Tom Smallat and Circle for the content in the slides. I will update my slides with links and then release them to everyone. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan. I really need to. I really need to have a go at some speedrunning stuff at some point. I've done a little bit with some Breath of the Wild and learned a few techniques and things. It's absolutely insane for anyone who hasn't tried it. I would really recommend at least like learning a couple little bits and pieces. It's absurdly fun. And it feels really strange to do things that the designers have not meant for you to be able to do. Also, I don't know, I have to point out the fact that when Mario captures an onion, he grows super long legs. That feels interesting to me, and I feel like we should talk about that later, mostly because most of my onions don't grow legs. Maybe I haven't been watching closely enough at night. So now we have Dan coming to talk about how he lives on a student budget. Take it away, Dan.
Hi, let me just share my screen. Hi. So yeah, as he says, this is going to be about how I live on a student budget, and hopefully you'll pick up a few tips for yourself. First off, a bit about me. I really hate this classic British mentality of not talking about your money. And I don't know if you noticed, but this photo is not me. This is Martin Lewis, the money saving expert. I think he's fantastic. He's really reputable here in the UK. He hosts a TV show. He has been around an awful long time, and he's famously independent. It's basically his whole brand. So pretty much everything in his talk at one point or another has come out of his mouth. Right now, I'm a PhD student. So I'm a little different to a lot of other students insofar as I get paid monthly instead of termly. I'm on about £16,000 a year. But when you subtract my higher income, my higher expenditures, because I live in the city centre and only live with one other person and stuff like that, I've actually got about the same income left over as I did when I was a student. When I started uni, I made the classic mistake. In the very first week, straight after getting my loan in, I spent £370 on my recommended reading, which kind of forced me into learning all this stuff pretty quickly. So the first thing that pretty much everyone will already know, obviously, is student discounts. Student discounts are fantastic, and they are everywhere. There are two main sites that will enumerate these. There's Unidays and Student Beans. I'd really recommend that you sign up to both of these. You can put your university email address in, and for an example, last week I saved 20% off my whole EE contract for the next 2 years, which is a pretty sizable amount, really. You should also watch out for student bank accounts. If you don't already have one, they're really useful. Insofar as most of them have 0% planned overdrafts, and a lot will come with free rail cards or other random free stuff. On that note, if you spend over £90 a year on train travel, you should definitely buy a rail card anyway. They get you a third off basically all your train tickets, so it's very much worth it. Price comparison sites, very important if you're going to be paying any sort of bills. Obviously, I'm sure you know about them, but what you may not know is that a lot of them don't actually show you all of the options. They only show you the ones that they have deals with the supplier, because that's how they make money. Anyone they recommend, they get a kickback from the supplier. So a lot of them will have a little tick box or something that says, oh no, please actually show me everything, but some won't. So I always recommend the Cheap Energy Club by money saving expert Martin Lewis. It's completely independent, and it does show you everything by default. And one of the nice features is that they'll email you at any point whenever they can see a cheaper deal. So 3 months into your contract or something, they might say, oh, it's actually cheaper if you switch. Even if you have to pay exit fees, it still will end up cheaper. Although they'll work it all out for you, which I think is really useful. So I want to talk about pots a little bit. So pots are something that's come out of the startup banks, things like Monzo and Revolut, but they're now filtering into the mainstream banks as well. In general, they're just small parts of your current account that you can kind of put to one side. You can kind of pay money into it, but it's all part of one account. You can automatically tell it, like, when you get paid, put this much of it into a number of pots. I follow the 4 pots plan. So there are 4 pots, the idea, split into short-term essentials, which are your food, your bills, your transport, anything that you need between the times when you get paid. There's long-term essentials, which you may not have. A common example is something like car tax, car insurance. Your long-term luxuries, which are your annual holiday, and your short-term luxuries, which will be your nights out, your takeaways, your meals out with mates, whatever. So to calculate how much you should put into your short-term pots, you basically work out how much you will spend on those things between when you get paid. So if you get paid termly, you think, oh, I'll have to pay rent 3 times in that term, so I put 3 times my rent into that pot. For long-term pots, it's basically the opposite. You say, I've got a holiday in a year's time I want to go to, it'll cost £1,000. I get paid 3 times in that time, so I pay £333 in every time I get paid. You might think this is a bit of a weird order, and the reason is because if you completely cock this up, which you may well do the first time, you always start at the bottom and work your way up. So you take the money out of your bottom pot, the short-term luxuries, meaning that no matter how bad you cock up, you'll still have enough money for your food, your bills, your transport, your rent, things like that. Really important. But despite all of that, sometimes an overdraft is really useful, right? If you want to have a big expenditure or something like that, that will take you into the red. But importantly, never, ever, ever use an unplanned overdraft. They are terrible. The interest rates will absolutely bite you, and the fees are terrible. As I said earlier, on student bank accounts, 0% interest-free, 0% interest accounts are everywhere. So if you just check, you'll probably have it, and you just have to sign up for it, and you'll be able to use it. But even if you don't have a 0% overdraft, or you can't find one, you should still get whatever they're offering you, because it'll still be way better than any unplanned overdraft out there. Obviously, if I talk about overdraft, I have to talk about credit cards. The number 1 rule with credit is if you cannot guarantee that you will pay it off in full every single month, don't even consider it, right? So you may ask, why bother getting one at all? And so the one that everyone will always tell you is that it helps build your credit rating, which I'll talk about in a second. But this only counts if you pay it off in full every month, because if you don't, that will be on your record for 3 years, and it will make it far worse than if you just never got the credit card in the first place. The other thing is if you use more than 50% of your credit limit, that will stay on your record for 3 months. So it's not as bad, but it's still not great. The big advantage is that it delays your spending by a month. This is why they exist, right? So if you want a laptop now, but your student loan doesn't come in until next month, you can buy the laptop now, and then when your money comes in, you can pay off your credit card. Easy peasy. Another really big advantage is consumer protections under Section 75 of the Consumer Credit Act, which basically says that if you buy something and the company goes bust before you receive the goods, then the bank will basically pay you back for the money you spent. This is especially important on things like flights, where if you buy a flight and then your airline goes bust, you get your money back. This isn't covered by debit cards. This is a credit cards only thing, which is very much worth noting. So I mentioned credit ratings. There are 2 companies that give credit ratings out, which are Equifax and Experian. There is a third, but no one uses it. And basically, if a company wants to check if you have good credit, they will ask one of these 2 companies. You can check your credit score for free through ClearScore for Equifax and Money Saving Experts Money Club. I love Martin Lewis, which will check your Experian score. And they'll also give you like really handy bits of advice about it. So this is a snapshot of mine. You see my score is 506, which is out of 600. This is ClearScore. And it can tell me that last month, my short-term debt has decreased, which is quite handy to know. And the reason why my score isn't full is because my credit utilization is basically means in the last 3 months, I did go above 50% of my credit card limit. You can also see on the right that I've made all of my payments for the last 4 years, which is quite nice. It's always handy to keep an eye on this, just to make sure you keep on top of it. So I just want to quickly talk about Curve. Curve is a meta card, and their branding for this is all your cards in one. Basically, you upload all of your cards to their system, and they send you one card. You can add new cards at any time, and you just carry that one card around. And at a moment's notice, you can swipe between. So one moment it can be your debit card and you can swipe. And then if you pay, it'll be your credit card. And then you can swipe and it'll be your Monzo or your savings or whatever like that. So that's just generally quite useful. But the money saving bit is that it allows you to keep track of all your spending in one place. You don't have to check 3 bank statements or 3 apps to make sure you keep track of your spending. You can see, like in the middle screen, all of your spending in one really easy to see screen. And they'll also automatically categorize everything. So you can see on the right that I spent £128 on food and drink this month. That's mainly thanks to Valentine's Day. Absolutely shameful. But yeah, so it nicely categorizes it and you can keep track of everything. So you know exactly what you're going to spend, what you've been spending, which also helps building the pots or knowing how much to put into each pot. And that's everything. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Dan. That's really interesting. I definitely love how much of a show you are for money saving experts. I definitely don't read enough articles or read enough of stuff that's on there. Make sure that everyone can chuck questions in the chat for Dan. I'm sure that he would love to answer all of your really complicated money questions in great detail, I'm sure. All right. So moving on, next we'll have Ori to talk about the macro metaprogramming and why it's awesome and until it's not. So Ori, are you around? Yep, awesome. Take it away.
Oh, hello there. Okay, so welcome to my talk about macro metaprogramming, which appeared through one of my weirdest journeys 3 years ago. Maybe you will get a few tips and tricks. But basically, what is all this? Does my camera work? Oh, yeah, it does. All right. So macros is, well, it's a C preprocessor. Macros are used in there. And it's essentially a glorified copy-paste tool. It exists mainly because C89, the first original standard of C, did not have constants. And another reason would be Dennis Ritchie, the creator of C. He did not put constants in, and he wanted to see the world burn. because macros are actually extremely powerful. They are really awesome, and I will show you why and why you should be very careful about them. So let's say you want to define a constant in C89. You wouldn't use constant. Instead, you would use #define, and you essentially type in the name and its value, and then you just use it. The first line print will print it out, and the second one will print the value of pi. And essentially the compiler will pre-process it, but we can do it manually using -e flag, and it will output this code. It essentially takes in all these macros, all these defines, and puts them into the code, and then you can compile it, and then it will output what you expect it to output. But this is pretty basic. But I mean, in essence, constants is just a named literal in terms of C language. But where's the madness? This was pretty basic. Level 1 would be parameterized macros. So like the first one is just a constant, but you could actually like define a macro which accepts an argument. For instance, right here, it accepts X, print number accepts X, and it prints out this whole thing with a number inside. And you use it, print num5, print num bmog, and it should print out this. Right here, you pre-process it. It replaces print num with printfs, and notice that the macros are completely gone. And then when you run it, you get the output. You get what you expect. It just works. Now, it's pretty basic, still pretty basic. What you can also do is convert the input into a string. Notice the #x. It basically, what it does, I'll show you. You print num, both of them as usual, and then when you pre-process it, you notice that 5 and bmog are also passed in as strings. It's a really neat trick, which comes in really, really handy afterward, like later on. And when you run it, you can see now it says printing 5 and printing bmog. It's pretty cool. Now, level 3 would be generating functions, which is kind of an important thing in terms of game hacking, which is where most of this journey originated from, where I discovered macros. So let's say a game has network variables. Acceleration and gravity, doesn't matter what it is. We have a regular print num thing. And what you do right here is just print acceleration value, then you change it into 12, and then you print it again. And when you run it, you get 10 and 12. But let's say, like, when you do game hacking, it's much more difficult. It's not as simple as accessing some map directly. You need to like call a function which accesses it. So let's replace it with some code generation. So the same code as before. Then you define this macro, which is like netvar, which generates a function, net_x. These two hashtags, they concatenate X. And then you just access it somehow. Right here, it's a simple map lookup, and you return it. Then you define these macros, define these netvars, and then you just use them. Net_acceleration, the same code. Then you pre-process it. Notice that it generates these functions, and then you just use them, and then it just works. Wonderful. All right, so we learned constants, we learned stringification, we learned concatenation. These two hashtags they just concatenate the value, the input. Let's build something completely insane. Let's build like a configuration system. For instance, you define a config. Like you have a type, essentially a variable. You have a type for a variable, you have name for a variable, and its default value. So you just rewrite it, and then you can like add some future expansions like key binding. But don't worry, I won't go back to this. Then you just use the config. You define each option as a config option, like menu open, Boolean, it's set to false by default, and then you use it even more. Fun fact, I copied this from my old CSGO hack. Don't worry, I was only hacking against other hackers. It's good fun. But you've got these configs. We need to somehow save them into files and load them back in. So you define this function like save config. It does something. It calls this do config macro. Then load config function just does do config. It takes a map and calls a macro. What does that macro do? Well, you can already see that this is gonna be long. It takes location, which right here was the map, and it takes an option S or L. And what it does is then takes the type, the option type, and concatenates it with config, and then passes these through. And it passes a single config value menu open, for instance. And then you repeat that with everything. It looks really complex, but if you unpack it one by one, it's actually really simple. It just calls either sconfig or lconfig. And sconfig is a simple take the value, put it into a string, and put it into the map. Lconfig is the same thing, but reverse. Then you just use it. You call save config, print it out, load config, and then compile it, you run it, and then, oh, crashes, come on. Don't worry, I will just debug this. We got a debug. Let's check backtrace. Yeah, we found the crash in load config. Let's check that frame. Oh, it's in do config. Oh, it's in do config. For the reference, this is pre-processed output. It crashed somewhere here. I don't know. So it essentially conceives the vibe of using macros. They're really awesome. You really want to get you're really tempted to fly to the moon, but then you get grilled like Icarus. That's essentially it. Like if you ever go to use macros, they're a really useful tool. Don't do a config system out of them, please. And don't make your like GUI use macros, and don't chain macros, even though it's really awesome and it allows you to do many things, but for your own good, don't. So yeah, this is about it. One link, actually, not some links. It's just my talk's GitHub. I will push this talk in just a minute. It has an obfuscation example, which I didn't fit. It's really awesome. It's really snazzy. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for listening, and I'll give it away to
hello again. Thank you so much, Ari. I have to say that I love the genuine look of pain on your face as you brought up that last example. It's giving me absolute it's reminding me of some of the terrible macros that exist. Debugging macros, like you said, is one of the most miserable experiences I think you can experience in C. Seg faults, you get the hang of eventually, or maybe you don't, but it's memory accesses. Macros is when the compiler just goes and gives up. You also touched on one of my favorite things that exists. Constants in C are hilarious because they're not always constant. You can still write to them sometimes. And also, they're different in C and C++, because of course they would be. Why would things be useful? So thank you so much. I've got some great questions lined up at the end for that. Hope you're ready. And make sure everyone chuck questions in the chat, either from this talk or any other talks before, and I'll make sure to get to them at the end. Now, for a dramatic change of pace, we have Zoe coming to talk about why computer science needs the humanities. Zoe?
Hello.
Hi. Yes.
Hello,
Cool. So Zoe's going to talk about computer science and the humanities. Take it away.
Hang on. Let me just share my screen. Hey, sorry about that. So I'm Zoe, obviously. I guess I just want to start my talk by saying I'm not really a computer scientist at heart. Before I came to uni, I really wanted to do politics, but I was thinking, oh, I really want to do something impactful and like useful for society. And wrongly, I thought, oh, you know, politics, humanities, that's not going to be useful. So I thought I'd do something else that was interesting, computer science. And I really liked it. I really, really love computer science. I'm in my third year now, so I feel really confident and wonderful and excited for all the things we're about to do. And I'm sure many people who do computer science would relate as well. And I've recently been getting interested in AI, not just in my course, but outside in like general, like other stuff around it. So I recently got invited to a artificial intelligence and human rights webinar run by the Law Society in Birmingham, ELSA. And, you know, like law's not my favorite thing. It wasn't that interesting. It was a bit over my head. And eventually, though, they kind of like got around to talking about computer scientists and programmers. And I was like, oh, okay, here we go. And they were like ruthless. They were like so mean. They kind of depicted us as like cold, money-grabbing programmers who churn out code without any regard for who it affects or what it does to the world. And I was like, oh, that's so wrong. That doesn't fit with my image that I have of the people around me. The people around me are like wonderful, caring, innovative people. So I was thinking of like trying to think of an argument with this guy. I was like, oh, you know, I'm going to come up with an argument and I'm going to refute this. And in the end, I couldn't, you know. I thought back to my whole 3 years of computer science, and I thought back to my modules in security, AI, everything that's really impacting. And there had actually been very little talk on morals and ethics. A lot about legality, but not much about is it moral, is it right, should we do what we do? And if this experience is universal across computer science in many universities, this is really worrying. As you can see, there is an increase in computer scientists. Computer science is becoming very popular. We're going to have a lot of us, and we're going to have a lot of impact. And if we're not aware of what we're doing, if we're not aware of the ethical implications, that's really worrying, and that could lead to many harmful things. An example of this is a study that was done recently on racism and the US healthcare system. The study revealed that there was actually massive disparities in the treatment between Black people and white people in the US because of algorithms in the US healthcare system. The algorithms would assign Black people to a certain level of sickness that when it actually turned out that the Black people were actually a lot sicker than their white counterparts who were also at that level of sickness. And this was because the algorithm used data from previous hospital data. And it turned out that Black people, less money was spent on treating Black people in the US healthcare system. And therefore the algorithm assumed that Black people were generally healthier, when in fact they were probably equally as sick, if not sicker. And this led to over 50% of Black people not receiving the right specialized healthcare that they needed. Another example of this that would probably hit closer to home for a lot of people, especially first years if there are any here, is the A-level results scandal that happened last year. Due to coronavirus, A-level students last year couldn't sit their A-level exams. And so the government decided to use an algorithm to decide their grades for university. This caused a lot of controversy because it turned out that because of the way the algorithm was structured, private school students who had smaller class sizes ended up only receiving their predicted teachers' grades, which were considerably better than what the algorithm had given to the state school students. No one hopefully intended this to happen, but it was a massive oversight that eventually was turned over because there was such a disparity in grades. This was a quote from an article I read about this, which kind of really sums up not just these two examples, but many examples that I don't have time to go over. We are building these algorithms to get rid of bias, yet we inherently have a lot of bias in our data. So what can we do about this? There must be a solution to this. And the solution to this is we need to start consulting the humanities. I recently brought up the healthcare situation, the healthcare article I read, to a friend of mine who studies history. And instantly she wasn't surprised. She studied American history, she studied racism, and she was like, yep, that doesn't surprise me. And the same with the A-levels. No one who studies inequality was surprised. We have experts waiting, waiting for our opinion. They know they already know what these kind of things are going to cause, yet they have no input when we're making them. It's incredibly frustrating for a lot of the experts in humanities. At the law webinar that I was at, they were complaining that the lawyers were having to catch up, the law was having to catch up with the privacy issues, the ethical issues that were being caused by computer scientists. This is a really interesting quote that I like from Weapons of Math Destruction, a book called Weapons of Math Destruction by Cathy O'Neill. And I think this is very true. I think the world is going to go in this way. I don't think we can stop the world from going in this way. I think what we can attempt to do is make this less biased. If we're going to process people, we have to try to process people fairly. So there's two things we can do. We can, one, hope to look at our own biases, but this isn't foolproof. Part of ignorance is not knowing when you're ignorant. So the second and probably more reliable thing is to start including people who study humanities in our software building when we build algorithms. We need to stop just networking ourselves to other STEM majors, other computer scientists and mathematicians. We need to bring, political scientists, psychologists, sociologists, geographers, historians into our software building process, because they know what's going to happen before we even do it. We are building algorithms because we want the world to be easier, we want it to be fairer, we want it to be more structured. But the algorithms we're building are using data from society. The society is not fair, it's not structured, and it's not easy. Our algorithms are actually just reflecting the status quo. If we shouldn't be looking to society now as inspiration of how to build our algorithms. We should be looking to society, the society we want to be, the world we want. And unfortunately, we don't know that. As computer scientists, we don't know how to do that. No one knows better how to do that, and no one understands society better than like I said, our psychologists, our sociologists, our historians, our geographers, our political scientists, our lawyers. That's who we need to consult, and that's who we need to talk to. Thank you. That's what I have to say.
I've realized I've been on mute. Awesome. Yeah, great. That's my bad. So thank you, Zoe, so much. I love your quote where you're saying we should be looking at where we want to be, not where we are. I would love to use that quote to quote you. There's some great questions in the chat. I will 100% be asking them. I hope you're prepared to give some good answers. All right, so yeah, sorry for the mute. I'm just realizing you're going to all catch up in a few moments. But yeah, I'm completely blown away by that. I love that. And for our final talk, we have James coming to talk about artificial intelligence and how programmers scams the art world, which I think is a pretty good follow-on. Right, James, take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm just sharing my screen. Right, here we go. So my talk is on artificial intelligence. So in 2018, Christie's which is one of the world's most prestigious auction houses, they put up an auction all about AI art, and all of the pieces in it were created by artificial intelligence. So understandably, it got a lot of attention. And the masterpiece in question was this. This is a portrait of Edmond de Bellamy, which is a totally fictional person. And in the right-hand corner, you can even see the little, a little section of an algorithm that was used to create it. So there's the full name. So it's put together by this artist trio called Obvious, and they used a data set of 15,000 portraits dating from the 14th to 20th centuries. And to be honest, it kind of works. So on the left, there's paintings by Caravaggio, on the right by Rembrandt, and you can see how it fits in. Now, what's so shocking about this for me is the asking price. So for this print, they were asking for $10,000, which is just crazy money, really. And I think what's even more insane is the amount that it sold for, which was almost $500,000, which is 43 times the asking price. So it's really kind of an unfathomable amount of money. So understandably, the world went a bit crazy. Every newspaper published it, whether an art newspaper like the one on the right or the New York Times, and everyone thought AI art was the next big thing. Everyone wanted to invest in AI art. The problem was, it kind of all collapsed. So a few months later, for sale, which was by a very renowned artist, and instead of reaching that kind of $500,000 figure, it only sold for 50,000. Now, I know 50,000 still sounds like a crazy amount of money, and it is, but really it should have been higher based on that previous $500,000. So the big question is, why did this kind of AI art bubble burst? And I think one of the big reasons, the first one, is sameness. So here you can see that $500,000 portrait, the one beneath 50,000, and the one on the right is just stuff from the internet. And they all kind of look the same. People have called this the Francis Bacon effect, and Francis Bacon is a well-known 20th century painter. And if you compare it, you can kind of see it, all those blurred features. So what kind of happened was, after that big sale, all these artists started putting out similar artworks. And I think the art world was kind of like, why are all these supposedly revolutionary AI things looking the same? And linked to that is the way they're made. So these images are made on generative adversarial networks, GANs, and pretty much you have two neural networks. One is trained to produce images, and the other is trained to kind of say whether it passes the test or not. So you get these two networks feeding into each other and producing all these outputs. So part of the reason why all of the works look the same is because they were made in the exact same way. So there wasn't really kind of an artist's signature to it. And the next reason why the art market kind of collapsed for AI art was a lot of bad press. Because as soon as things are widely publicized for a $500,000 sale, all the tech people came forward saying, actually, this isn't that difficult to do. And then all the art people started looking at all these other similar works and saying, again, this can't be that revolutionary if 50 different artists are all doing the same thing. But the biggest bit of bad press comes from this guy, Robbie Barrett. And he's sort of a teen AI guru. And he used to post loads of things on GitHub using these GANs. Notably, he did GANs based off of portraits. So on the left is one of these pre-trained GANs that Robbie put on GitHub, and he managed to produce those 9 images. And on the right is the one from Obvious. So is not just that they look similar, they are ridiculously similar. It's quite obvious they were trained on the same data set. So I think now it's quite important that we look at the Obvious team. So there's 3 of them here. The one on the left, he was a consultant. One on the right did digital marketing for a music firm. And the one in the center, he's actually the only one with like computer science knowledge. And he was doing a PhD in machine learning. And importantly, note his name, Hugo Casal Dupre. So Robbie was looking at his GitHub and he realized he actually had a conversation with this Casal guy. And not only did he kind of like give hints, he literally rewrote aspects of his code, which then Casal used to create this image. So not only was that $500,000 artwork quite simple to do, the group that made the money from it didn't really do it. It was all this guy, Robbie Barrett. So really, I think Obvious was quite terrible there because they just ripped off another coder as well as ripping off the art market. So I think the big question now is, how did Obvious scam the art world so successfully? Now, first reason I think is purely aesthetics. This is other work by them based on Japanese stamps. I think they look really cool. I would quite like a poster of one of their things. I can understand why people would buy it. So I think they do deserve some credit. But I think where they deserve a ton of credit is their marketing. So this is one of the posters they made, and they wrote a manifesto, which they sent out to all of the big newspapers, all of the auction houses, all of the galleries. And I think whereas Robbie was doing cool things with his art, he definitely didn't have that kind of marketing behind him. And I think that brings me to the final reason why I think Obvious was so successful scamming the art world, which was they quite literally went to a different world. So, well, literally, figuratively. So whereas Robbie Barrett was uploading things to GitHub, the average person who's in the art world or even outside the tech world probably doesn't even know what GitHub is. I think with Obvious coming from different backgrounds, they realized there was something cool going on here which could be marketed. And by taking something from the tech world and removing it from that tech context and moving it to something totally new, they managed to make a crazy amount of money from it. And I think that's really kind of a lesson for us to learn as programmers or computer scientists. Just because something seems simple to us, to the average person, there's a lot. It can be like pretty impressive. And I think we need to look outside our world. So is there hope for the AI art market in the future, despite Obvious pretty much scamming it? I think there is. So there's one artist I really like called Trevor Paglen. And if you look at this image, hopefully the stream is good enough, you can see all of these lines over this image of a cloud. So the idea behind it is when we're kids, we always look up at the sky and say what the cloud looks like. Well, here he used pre-trained neural networks to do image recognition on it, but then he traced which algorithms they were using. So you can actually see these lines on it, which are called Huff lines. So it's showing how the computer sees, which I think is really clever. Here's another example, again, totally different, but I think quite beautiful. This image was, he trained an algorithm on bits of Freud and the symbols in Freud. So you could scan around your room and it would give some kind of Freudian interpretation. So this was an image he made of false teeth, which is all to do with anxiety, which he then sold. And of course, it does still have this Francis Bacon effect, but I think there's a lot more thought behind it, and it goes beyond just that kind of basic, these are paintings, I can make a painting too. This one I think was really kind of scary, and that was using images from drones and soldiers in the Afghanistan war and using that to create an image again, kind of getting us thinking about how technology is used and how lots of wars today are actually all to do with wars of images. So thank you for listening to my talk. I hope you enjoyed.
Thank you so much, James. That was really awesome. There's some great questions as well. I'm just going to grab the last one. Make sure to chuck any of the more questions you have in the chat. There's some really good ones already. We hopefully will have time to go through them all. I absolutely love that. I love that there's scams all round. They scammed the art world, but also scammed someone else. And I don't know. It's quite fun to think about, even though it's completely, I don't know, is it unethical? Maybe, who knows? Hopefully we'll get a chance to discuss that all in the Q&A, which is now. So if all of the speakers want to come back now, the idea is I'm going to take some questions. Anyone, please chuck questions in the chat and we'll kind of have a discussion around any of these topics that we want to talk about. There's some really fun questions. But not everyone is back yet. I think James is still gone, but that's fine. Oh yeah, cool, and Ryan. But yeah, I'll just avoid having. Oh, cool, we're all here now. Yay! Cool. Interesting. We can't see them all on the stream. I'm just seeing, but anyway, that's fine. Rich will handle that. Okay, so let's go back to the start. Oliver. Great question in the chat right now. Do you have any funny stories about tracking the activity of someone else on your machine? Have you ever watched someone try and attack you in a really obvious or bizarre, funny way? Any good stories about that?
I once had, in a competition, I was actually talking to the person whilst they were attacking me. Like I was discussing the techniques they were using and how I was like going through and actually looking at them going through and saying, oh yeah, I didn't expect you to do this. I saw that your code was doing this. I thought that was quite exciting. And the other way, I was talking to another person, but through their file system. I was like typing messages by making files on their computer that they were defending. So those are quite good stories, I think.
I love that. That's great. Yeah, I've definitely had the thing where chatting with other people while doing a box is really, really fun. It's very strange, though. Ryan, I am really intrigued by that, by the graph you showed at the beginning with the time. It follows like this really, it seems to follow this really nice curve, which seems like it seems to go, like almost like an upside down log curve or something like that. I'm sure there's a technical name. If anyone else knows it, please to say. Anyway, do other games follow the same progression? Do they all have this moment where it suddenly dips and then kind of levels out, or do other games have very different progressions? Do you have any idea about that?
So generally, yeah, you will see this over time. So the first speedruns are going to be quite slow because no one knows any, like, we don't know any tricks yet. We just play the game as intended, and then someone breaks something, and then originally all of this time save is going to be quite major at the beginning, and then later on it's going to be battling for the few seconds. So you will see this progression happening quite a lot, and I believe with the newest Mario game we are definitely starting to see this trend. It's great because I can go on the leaderboards for each game and have a look at the graphs and see everything that's happening, and I quite like that. So yes, I believe that's the answer.
Awesome, that's really cool. I really love that. The speedrunning community is so awesome. They're genuinely all really nice people, most of the time, from what I've seen at least. Okay, let's go for Dan. We're just going to go all the way straight through because that's the easiest, and that's the order that I've written the questions in. So what kind of good starter credit cards are there out there? Can you recommend any bank credit cards, or are those any good, or do separate companies? Yeah, recommendations.
So I don't have any specific recommendations, but a good tip is to go with the bank you already have your current account with, or your savings, or the one your student loan gets paid into, because they know your spending, they know when your income comes in, what it is, so they may well offer you a better credit limit, because they know what to expect, and it's all about risk for them. Credit the clear score and stuff like that, they will give you some recommendations, but I've never done that, so I couldn't really talk about that. But the APR is probably the biggest difference between them. It's basically how much interest you pay, but that doesn't really matter. If you pay it off in full, that won't come into effect at all, right? That's only paid on the bit you don't pay off. So it's a bit of a muchness. Some will come with some benefits, which you might want to look into. But yeah. Oh, and if you do get a smaller credit limit to start off with, you can slowly increase it over time. Your bank may send you a letter saying, "Oh, we've just increased your credit limit." But if you start small, then you can't really cock it up too badly. Yeah.
Awesome. I've never had a credit card. Now your talk is making me think that I should probably think about doing it.
You don't have to. Like, if you don't trust yourself not to pay it off, don't do it.
Oh, I do trust myself to it, but I've always kind of gone, I've never felt the need to have one because I've always managed to meet bills on time. But maybe there's enough benefits that are there.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to the metaprogramming talk, which I deeply enjoyed. The moment that your macro thing came up, I actually squirmed with the now let's save the macros to a file and have this miserable thing. Of course, I have to ask the question. So obviously there was a lot of repetition in your code where you were writing out all the things you have to save, and that's a bit miserable, isn't it? And macros are supposed to save time and allow you to define functions. Why can't you just do macros for macros? And can you not do that? Is there no tool that you could use?
Oh, I did that. I just thought it wouldn't fit into the talk. You can actually create the file with all the macros and define the macro for that and include the file. And it will have a different macro applied for the file. And
wait, sorry, just to clarify, wait, I thought I was okay at macros. Wait, you can apply macros to entire files?
Hold on, I have it released somewhere.
That's absolutely terrifying, and also something it's terrifying. I don't have a use case for it, and I think it's a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea, and no one should ever do it. But it's awesome that you could. I don't know. Is it awesome you can do it? Yeah. Well, the other thing I was noticing, you started off writing C, and then there was some C++ in there. Which one do you use?
I use Rust.
Oh, that's the right answer, I guess. Nice. All right.
I will link into the chat.
Yes, please do. Everyone go read this horrible thing that is about to be shared.
All right.
All right. Zoe, loved your talk so much, by the way. I think that there's a lot within a lot of computer scientists. It's something I haven't realized until recently. And so your talk was one of the things that kicked it off.
I think my housemates might be about to restart our router. Our internet's very bad. So would we be able to do that?
Yeah, that's fine. That's great. Yeah, cool.
Sorry.
We'll come back to Zoe in a moment. Okay, James. So what was really interesting is I love this because it's the intersection of tech and art. So there's so many questions. I'm trying to pick the right one. So you mentioned the algorithm's available, or the rough algorithm that was used to do this is available on GitHub. In your opinion, does that change the value of the art? Should that change the value of the art? Does it make a difference at all?
Yeah, so this is a really good question. So historically, things being widely available doesn't really change the value of art. So in like the early 20th century, there's people like Marcel Duchamp who went to the shop, bought a urinal, wrote his name on it, and that was the artwork. There's been people like Andy Warhol who've remade cans of soup, sold it. So those are all multi-million-dollar artworks, which will be in lots of art history books. So those will all sell for crazy amounts of money. Whether they should be worth that much, who knows? What's value anyway? What people will pay for it.
Yeah, it's so weird because it seems really unintuitive, but I love it. I do have to ask though, have you ever done it? Have you ever like been inspired to try some of this yourself? Do you have any projects where you're looking at this?
Yeah, I have a couple. So at the moment, I'm trying to create imaginary holiday photos. So normally I will like go on holiday with my family, and I haven't been able to see my family for a year. So I kind of want to train a data set on past holiday photos I've had with my family and kind of produce this imaginary holiday, which I haven't managed to have. So there's things like that which are just a bit of fun.
I love that, and at the same time, I'm really horrified because I've seen some of the ones that you shared are really weird bodies. I'm slightly disturbed to see what a holiday photo would look like, where everyone's face looks like it's about to fall off. But that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's such a cool thing to have. If you make progress on that or get stuff, please, if you feel happy doing that, please share them. I really want to see those. They sound awesome.
For sure.
All right, let's skip around a bit more. Zoe doesn't seem to be back just yet, so we'll pop back right up to the top. Oliver. Someone asked, are there any freely available sites to practice this kind of stuff on? I'm honestly not super aware of them. What exists out there?
So Hack the Box has recently released a version of attack defense where you and a partner, or you and 4 people, you can be in a team of 2 or a team of 4, and you get 4 boxes or 2 depending on how many people there are, and it's like a team versus team. But I prefer it when it's a large group. And with Hack the Box, you get 2 for a free. Each month you get 2 matches free, or you can get 5 matches for VIP, or some more for VIP plus. But for the last 3 months, Hack the Box has been doing tournaments, and the people who win the tournaments get prizes, and you get unlimited matches for a 6-hour period, or however long the tournament goes on.
Nice. So what's that called again? The names of those?
Hack the Box Battlegrounds. I think it's the last link on my slides, like at the bottom of the resources.
Yeah, that reminds me, all the slides will be shared. We'll get them, post them in the Discords and such, and so you can look through them in your own time. I was going to say, yeah, when in tournaments, how have you done historically? If that's not too personal, how do you do well?
So in my first Hack the Box Battlegrounds, I got top of my rank, and then in December last year, I was doing a tournament of champions for it was part of the same competition, but like I hadn't got to this stage of the attack defense. It was like a capture the flag up to a point, and I came 4th in the attack defense. So
congratulations!
That was as a team, but yeah.
Nice. So you're definitely definitely qualified to give out advice for this. Yeah. Yes. Please keep encouraging us at AFNOM to do those, because they sound like loads of fun. Yeah, that's awesome. Ryan, more questions related to speedrunning. If someone like me or anyone else, hypothetically me, definitely not me, is interested in getting more into speedrunning, what would you recommend as a good place to start? Are there any specific tricks that are less challenging to pull off than others? Any specific things that we can look for? What did you start off with?
So it depends on the game, really. So for speedrunning, Odyssey is the second biggest speedrun game other than SM64, which is fairly obvious. So I started off by just playing the game, and then gradually I improved my movement before I bothered to learn any special tricks. And then after that, it was the case of grinding each section, grinding each IL, trying to know like exactly what buttons to press, exactly how to get from point A to point B, and then learning all of the cool tricks to show off with some flair.
Is there a specific trick though that you'd recommend starting off with?
For Odyssey, you need to definitely learn Mooncave Skip, which cuts out 10 minutes. And that is a very interesting jump right at the end to just completely skip out a boss fight and then just finish that, because honestly that's the biggest time save that you're going to get as like a beginner.
Nice. I don't need more things to do, but this sounds like one that I would love to spend loads of time on. All right. Zoe, you're back now.
Yes, I am, Mike. I'm sorry, that wasn't me trying to get out of questions. My housemates were like stood around the router about to smash it. I swear, like
holding hands, chanting, you know.
Yeah, literally on the floor praying. It was okay.
Awesome. So one of the things that you mentioned is that you said that in this law talk that people who are in law feel like they're constantly having to catch up with new innovations. Well, as someone in tech, I often feel that I need to keep up with innovations as well. It's difficult even just doing that. But do you feel like we're going to ever hit a point when maybe law doesn't need to stop doing that, where maybe they'll be able to catch up? Is that possible?
I don't think so. I think the point of this talk was because I don't think so. They kind of compared it to the Industrial Revolution. Like, how long did it take for us to get a sense of like ethics and morals around like the way we were treating workers? I think it's a similar kind of revolution. I think the point of my talk was that we can't count on lawyers to keep us, we can't and shouldn't count on lawyers to keep us ethical and moral. We should be trying to avoid having to create the laws in the first place. Like, they should be created, but we need to take the initiative and think, okay, is this actually the right thing to do? Rather than, you know, a few years down the line, someone takes someone to court, a company to court, and then a long process, and finally we stop very unethical things, you know, like,
so
think it will be solved.
So kind of what you're saying is that we need to self-regulate more until the law can kind of catch up.
Yeah, I think eventually the law will, you know, catch up, but I think it'll be a long time.
Yeah, I honestly can't wait until, I say we can't wait, it's very difficult to, but I'm really looking forward to the point where we get much better laws and comprehensive stuff on privacy. That's a personal pet peeve of mine. I'm really looking forward. I love GDPR, best thing, one of the best things ever, but it's still not enough, and every new thing with Facebook in the news is proving that it's still not enough, and that loads more needs to be done there. But like, so one of the things that you mentioned is that you gave the example of kind of hospitals learning from bad data. Is the problem bad data, or is it kind of, do you think the issue is if we use good data, if we could kind of quantify that or talk about having proper good data, would it be possible to avoid those problems entirely, or would we still have those issues?
Part of it is there's an argument that there is never good data. Certain things, like there are, you know, protected characteristics like race, gender, etc. These, no one intends to discriminate against these things, but there are certain things in data that kind of code for these things. So a lot of places, like your area where you live, can be a code for your ethnicity in a lot of places, etc. So we have to be really careful with the data we're using. but the other part of this is, it's not just data. The way certain companies operate, like Facebook, like some of these things Facebook do have nothing to do with data, and they're still very ethically and morally questionable, with elections and you know, like, there's a lot more to, I focus on data because I have an interest in AI, but there's a lot more to it than, and it's not just the data we collect, it's how we use the data. So again, Cambridge Analytica, like advertising, we don't really know what effect that's going to have. So it's not just the data, it's how we use it, and also like other things that like big platforms do. Hopefully we can get to a point where we can recognize like how to make the most unbiased data possible. But part of the process of making it unbiased is assuming that your data is always going to be biased. If you assume there's always going to be bias and there's always work to do, you'll probably be one step ahead of making like a mistake.
I love this so much. We'll come back, but yeah, I could listen I could talk about that far longer than we have available, unfortunately. Let's go back to Ori with macro metaprogramming. So kind of, when was the point you realized you went too far? Obviously, this talk was kind of inspired by a moment. What was the point that kind of made you realize that, okay, now's the time to backtrack and write a talk?
I believe, so first of all, I actually had a crash in the config system when I was loading from JSON, and it was a hell to debug. So it was like one of the irritations. But then, in addition to using it for macros for configuration, I also used macros for building GUI elements. So that added up. Then accessing all the places with macros, essentially code became 50% macros, unexpanded macros. And it was like, it became irritating to debug issues with the macros.
At that point, you sit back down and reconsider your life decisions, don't you?
It was pretty much that. It was pretty much just that. Yeah. And then you take a step back, and you rewrite it all. Instead of using macros, you use C++ generics, and the same cycle repeats.
Yeah, having used both, I much prefer using C macros because at least it's upfront about how miserable they are to use. C++ macro templates kind of sell you this idea that everything will be perfect. It's all a lie. That's awesome. Thank you so much for your talk on this. I'm so glad. I'm glad you had that moment of suffering so you could talk about it.
Thank you for that.
There was a really cool question for Dan on buying stuff. Kind of more specific, but about, are refurbished laptops value for money? Can you recommend them, or is it better to save and buy a new laptop? Like, this is a question that comes up year in, year out with new CS students, especially. What can you recommend?
On the refurbished front, not that much. I would say that it very rarely is worth trying to future-proof your laptop, because of how much the price goes down over time. It's often cheaper just to buy a cheaper laptop, and then when you need more, buy it again and sell your old one on as refurbished. So that kind of links into the refurbished stuff, that you could just buy the refurbished laptop first, and then when you need it, buy again, effectively.
Yeah. Darn it, you didn't. I was hoping that you would suggest ThinkPads, because then we could all get on the ThinkPad hype train.
Obviously, ThinkPads.
Yeah,
they're an excellent refurbished or second-hand laptop.
There we go. There we go. Yeah. Quick disclaimer to everyone listening, watching. Lots of people in AFNOM are big on ThinkPads, although I'm not sure we're quite as on it as much as specifying specific models. There are better models and there are worse models, but we don't talk about that. All right, we're going to finish off, I think, with a couple more questions, maybe one more question for James. Do you know, so one of the things with code and open source stuff is the question of kind of licensing. What's the code licensed under? And because it uses art pieces, do you know, what's the kind of complexity of whose intellectual property is it?
Yeah, so when things are used in kind of visual art, things get pretty difficult. So if you think about music, if someone sampled a track, they would have to pay the person who they use the sample from. So like if Kanye West does a little clip from someone else, that person will get a ton of money. When it comes to art, that's not really the case. You can kind of use what you want and you don't really owe anyone anything. So there's been quite a few cases of this where people have been kind of upset about their image being used, or even their product being used in various ways, but ultimately the law is in favor of art. So especially visual art. It's different when it comes to music, but for some reason it loves good old visual art stealing.
So yeah, I mean, especially with like I guess the Campbell soup tin set a rather interesting precedent, in that, you know, technically the soup company owns the art in a way, but yeah. The other thing with that is like, with Robbie's code being stolen, do you know if there's a legal case there? Has he said anything about maybe wanting to pursue that? I'm just kind of curious.
So he's made quite a few statements about it, and he's got, I think, a fair amount of press. He's, as a result, being like represented by a few galleries. So I think it has been good for his image, and getting his name out there. But I think the group that made that painting, which sold for $500,000, the art world kind of hates them. And I think it's widely acknowledged now that what they did was a scam. So I think Robbie has just come out looking pretty good out of it. But I'm sure he'll make some money in the future.
Yeah. All right. That, I think, concludes most of kind of the questions. There are probably more that I've missed. I'm really sorry if we didn't get to yours. But a few of us, and if you are in the speakers list and you did not know about this is the time you are now finding out. A few of us might be going over to Jacob's Wine Cellar on the CSS Discord. If you're not in the CSS Discord or the AFNOM Discord, you can check out the links in the description of this video. But a few of us will be going over to Jacob's Wine Cellar for a bit of a chat and some drinks. Maybe a little wine. I don't actually have any wine in, but I'm sure Jacob will have wine, and Jacob will drink wine for all of our entertainment. But please come along, just chat some more. I will not be the host. I'll probably be being very quiet while I rest my voice, which doesn't happen often. But anyway, thank you all so much for coming. This has been excellent. We'll be trying to get out copies of slides and stuff like that in the next few days. But yeah, thank you all very much for coming.